All right, I'll clear my throat so I can be official. Hi, you guys. Thank you for having me back for World Bionicle Day. I can't believe it's time to do this all again. Um, um, 2025, I think, is the 19th anniversary of my time spent drawing Lego Bionicle Ignition. Next year is the big year. It's going to be the big 20th, and I think we need to do something special for that. Um, Probably ought to be ready for that. So I don't know what we're going to do, but Liam and I are going to get our heads together. Maybe Steve will get involved, see if we can pull off something really big and kind of exciting. I will tell you that just 2 weeks ago, I was at the San Diego Comic-Con and interacted with some people at Lego and planted the seeds, talking to some people I knew, saying, hey, next year's the 20th anniversary. Can we talk about doing some things? So there may be some things in the works. We've only had discussions. Nothing is set up, but parties look interested. How's that? I'm hoping that you guys get your questions ready. I'm happy to talk about the time I spent drawing Lego Bionicle for the 2 years. I began with the Piraka and run all the way through Motoro. A spoiler, by the way, Motoro and his experience with the Mask of Life. I am going to be doing some live drawing tonight. And I have some pretty cool pieces from the archives that I can show you of Lego Bionicle art that I've done. Let's make sure that I can see the feed. Steve, I see, let's see. I'd be more than happy to talk over what you could do. I have no idea what that means. Yeah, Ian, Terrificon was great. So please come see me next. I hope I'm there next year. I was at Terrificon this last weekend. Saw so many great artists. I told a lot of people about World Bionicle Day at at that show, as well as San Diego Comic-Con. So it'll be interesting to see if we have any new faces, new visitors from my time plugging this event for that. Let's see. By the way, can everybody hear me well? Does everything look well? Look good? If I need to fix anything, let's address it now before I get too involved. Give me a thumbs up, Steve, or anyone else if you can see and hear this as you should. I pulled some stuff out of the archives. This is going to be good. So the problem with this is I kind of have to ping pong between OBS and Facebook to make this work, but I think I've got it set up to where I can see both right now. Let's see. Okay, everyone can hear me. So I'm going to move on. So if you guys didn't know, I'm going to tell a couple stories. Some of these you guys may have heard, some of you maybe haven't, but a lot of people ask me how I got involved with the Bionicle comic book in the first place. I was able to draw it for 2 years. I was the penciler and inker for all of the issues of Bionicle Ignition, this series here. And I was actually hired to be the colorist for the cover, though once Alex Blayart was hired on to be the colorist for the regular series, it was decided that Alex should probably color the covers as well. Initially, I was going to do them. Lego really liked what Alex was doing. I thought he was doing a good job, and I said, why don't I step aside and have Alex do the covers? But if you have your copies, and you get out issue 0, the poster behind me, I colored. I lettered it. Let me start over. I penciled it, inked it, and I colored it. The cover for this with Thok climbing out of the canister, that was one that I also penciled, inked, and colored. And then the cover to issue 0 with Zactan, I penciled, inked, and colored as well. Those are the only 3 bits that I colored for a Bionicle Ignition. But if you have these comics, pull them out and compare the coloring. Alex typically was a lot brighter than I was. I was a little bit more muted and atmospheric. Left to my own devices, I can go kind of crazy and make stuff like this. This was an image of Brutaka that I made not terribly long ago, where I just got to do everything all on my own exactly the way I wanted. And given my druthers, I think that Bionicle Ignition might have looked like this, which, as cool as I think it is, maybe wasn't what some 10-year-olds would have been looking for. I actually give Lego an awful lot of credit for giving me the freedom they gave me. I think that Lego's got such a tight brand. I always think of that yellow head, and I had the police sets and the space sets when I was little, and there's a great consistency there. I think that for Lego to hire somebody who could turn in a sample like this to get the job took a lot of nerves. I actually did 2 sample pieces to land the job, and this was one of the Rakshi. This was not one that they asked me to do. They actually described a particular piece, and it was a couple Bionicles in a sort of an underground compound. But the piece was very busy, and I wanted something that could sort of show off an individual figure, so I made this as well. I do know that this piece ended up being colored by somebody, I think at Wildstorm, and it became sort of part of the presentation pitch to help me get the job. So a lesson for everybody: if you really want a job and you're asked to make a sample piece, why not make 2? Give them more reason to hire you. One of the things that was kind of interesting about this job was when I was hired to do it, DC Comics was deeply involved. So Lego obviously made the toys, and DC Comics was brought in because they were great at making comic books. They make Batman, Superman, and things like that. So the way I understand the flow of things was Lego said, we're going to supply you with the strip, communicate to you what we want to see have happen in the comic book, and then DC, you know how to make a comic book, so do it for us. So what that meant was, technically I worked for DC. DC billed Lego, and then DC paid me. But then anytime I had a question about anything in the script or how a toy should look or anything like that, all of my questions went through DC, which eventually went through Lego. I really had very little interaction with Lego directly. I wasn't allowed to. If anything was complicated, a scheduled conference call was set up, and there were no video conference calls. No one was doing anything like that then. But we would have about 6 of us on a phone line. And if you were really careful, you could kind of pick out who was actually talking. But as a result as well, one of the things that was interesting was that by contract, I had to work on comic art pages supplied by DC. And I hope you can see this. This is actually a pre-printed blue line page with DC Wildstorm logos on it. And why does that matter? Well, in my case, it was a little bit interesting in that the artwork that I do has a lot of grayscale. So this is if you guys tuned in years past, this is an axon that I drew for a previous World Bionicle Day. In fact, I've got notes on the back here. It says this was drawn August 10th, 2021 for Bionicle Day. You see there's a lot of grays in here. Well, if you draw conventionally to draw a comic book, you need to draw in strict black and white. And then if you do, these areas and things that are printed in blue are really easily removed via a digital leveling process. But if you use a lot of grays, that doesn't work that well. So right out of the gate, I remember we were talking to them and I said, so I have to draw these on your boards? And they said, yep, that is by contract. We'll supply you with paper. And I said, that's fine, but all of your blue lines are going to appear. And no one was quite sure what to do about that. And I finally just said, can I just draw it on the back? Does that, I mean, I won't be breaking the contract. It'll still be on your board. It'll just be on the back. So I actually used the back of all the boards for everything. And so tonight, for that reason, I had a couple pieces of the DC board left over. I thought it might be fun to see if I can draw on one of these again, just to do it the old-fashioned way. As well, what also is interesting is that there are 2 basic surfaces that the papers can be drawn on. There's a plate finish and a vellum finish. Vellum is rougher. Most modern comic book artists like to draw on a really hard plate finish. I, for years and years and years up until about this year, always drew on the rough finish. The funny thing is, about the last year and a half, I've transitioned to plate. I don't know what happened, but I remember I would call DC and I would say, I need you guys to send me more paper. And more than once, they forgot that I wanted the rough paper that the old timers used. But now, even I gave in. But so what's going to be fun is when I draw tonight, I'm going to be drawing on the old rough paper, which I really haven't done much in a while. So we're going to see what that looks like. While I was going through the dwindling number of paper Bionicle blank pages that I have, I dug out a few things that I thought I wanted to share. So I showed that axon that I drew in 2021. This is one I drew the year after. This was 2022. Did you guys tune in for this World Bionicle Day? This was an axon that I really, really enjoyed. And I liked him so much that I know I made a color version of it. Let's see if I can even find it here. Sometimes when you make a piece and you really like it, you intend it to be black and white, you get carried away. Here, look at this. If you hadn't seen it, there it is after the digital coloring. He is my favorite of the Bionicles. He was my go-to when I am asked to draw a Bionicle out of my head. It's typically him, which is funny because if you've ever tried to draw Axon's head, you find out it's not really a sphere. It seems like a sphere that's sort of bisected, but it's not. It's oblong to some extent. It's weighted kind of like a football is. And so getting that curve really matters when you're drawing them in a 3/4 view or a profile. And then once you've sort of got that in place, you need to sort of attach the fin on the top in just the right spot, or else it won't look right and you won't be quite sure why it's not right. But as a quick comparison, you can see this is pretty much a finished piece of art, but I've done a lot to sort of dictate where the lighting is going to come from in my lights and darks. And then the digital coloring just kind of enhances and reiterates that. I'm not going to have time to do any digital coloring tonight, but I might color later the thing I make tonight. So keep that in mind. Let's see. I want to make sure I don't have any questions that need to be addressed right here, right now. Liam, I'm assuming you're keeping an eye on all the comments. Okay, I haven't seen any come in from Facebook, so I'm going to push on. One of the things that is a little bit of a drag about working the way I work, which is to pencil on the board and then ink it, is that everything you draw in pencil is typically lost. Well, that's true for almost all comics. Nowadays, there are some people who will pencil something on a piece of paper, print it out in a blue line, and then scan that, or then ink that blue line, and they'll end up having an inked piece, a blue line board, and a pencil board. But again, I work a lot of grayscale, so I can't do much of that. But I did have some forethought, and I think this is a scan of, is this page 1 from issue 1 of Bionicle? I think this is either page 1 or page 2. But you can see this is how my pencils typically looked. I like to keep them, this big surprise to everybody who knows my work. I kept it kind of rough. From here, though, I went in and I inked things. This is a Xerox of the inks. And so you can see one of the key differences here is I knew I was going to do something atmospheric with the clouds, but it was really all came out in the inks. The pencils are often just sort of a placeholder of where the objects are going to be, and then I let the lighting kind of be solved in the inking process. Anyway, this is more or less what I would turn into Lego to then be colored by Alex Blayart. And as you can see, there's a lot of grit and grime put in the black and white art. Alex was really great at respecting when I had done things like this and I wanted things to be a little bit grittier. I remember when I first saw his work, it was jarring to me. I wasn't used to being colored by anyone else. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I didn't like it as much as I probably should have, just because I wasn't used to it. I was used to the way I did everything. The older I've gotten, the more I've learned about digital coloring, the greater respect I have for what Alex did. I think Alex did a really good job on my work. And when I was working on Lego Bionicle, just getting started in my career, I really don't think I was able to appreciate what he did. So, Alex, if you're watching, thanks for making me look good. Let's see, as a question from Juniper, you said that Axon's head was difficult to draw since it seems, since it seemed like a sphere, but not quite. Are there any other masks with neat tricks like that? So one of the tricky things about the Bionicle in general is that you're really kind of, you've got a lot of surface relief on almost everything. You know, this is, I'm trying to remember which one this is. This is the Black Toa. This is, what's his name? This is, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. You guys are going to beat me to the punch. Nuparu, I'd forgotten. You know, when I think of his head, there's so much here that you have to capture when it stands that is relief. Obviously, you've got the spikes that stick out, but what really is going to make his head really have a lot of depth and roundness to it is how much you can set the eyes back in the eye sockets and the glowing head for the teeth as well. even as I'm turning it now, you can sort of see just how deep his eye sockets are. That's the kind of stuff that is always tricky to draw the Bionicles. As you know, or as I think you guys know, when I drew these, I often cheated with the anatomy. I would have their anatomy behave a little bit more like human anatomy. I would let spines bend, toes on thock are bent over the canister on issue 1. And then sometimes I would even cheat a little bit and beef parts of their anatomy up, just draw them larger rather than moving differently or smaller. And one of the reasons is I think that, you know, this is a humanoid form, but we don't really have humanoid proportions. And so sometimes I would cheat to move them closer to humanoid proportions, just for the simple fact that I felt it was easier for the reader to emotionally connect with the characters. One of the things that I did try to change regularly were things like this. See that post that holds his head? I always thought that was so small. You know, that could be a little distracting. So that's the sort of thing I would beef up. And to be honest, I was very flattered that Lego gave me that kind of leeway. I don't think Lee Gallagher got to do that, and I don't think that Randy did either. So Lego, Toby, thanks for having some faith in me. Let's see. Thanks for work at Man Bionicle is a huge part of my childhood. What is your perennial favorite design for a Bionicle character? Man, Steve, it is always Axon. He's my favorite. He's got those fingers. He's got those big feet. The axe was great. I think what I also like about him, he's got those piston legs, so he really can hold a lot of weight. He's the one I go to again and again and again. I like Piraka pretty well. Some of his proportions are a little bit longer, and I know Piraka is more popular than Axon. I've run polls on this, but I just enjoy drawing Axon more. Thanks for great talking to you this weekend. Glad you made it home safe. Randy, I did, and it was good to see you. I'm sorry I won't see you in Baltimore. If you guys want to see me in person rather than have to ask these questions over Facebook and World Bionicle Day, go to my website at stuartsayger.com. There's a list in there of the different comic book conventions I'm going to go to across the country. I know I'm going to be at the Baltimore Comic-Con coming up, the New York Comic-Con. I should be at a couple conventions in Ohio, one in Indianapolis. I know I'm going to Denver later this year, so there are some pretty good opportunities away from the Midwest as well. And I try to bring a lot of nice Bionicle stuff with me. If you guys don't follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you should do it because, well, a few things. One, I'm going to have a follow-up Bionicle show here in about 10 days or so for some things I couldn't show here. I usually try to have a follow-up show after World Bionicle Day for all the things I didn't think to show or pull out. So follow me on either Facebook or Instagram. It's just my name behind me, Stuart Sayger. You'll find me. But in about 10 days, I'll have a really cool follow-up Bionicle show. And I've got a little bit more time there. I can draw and set up and do some different things there. But I got sidetracked for a second. I don't remember what I was talking about. Yes, Chris Murphy. I'm going to be at Bloomington. The Indiana Toy and Comic Expo is a really good one. So particularly if you're a toy fan, Bionicle fan, there'll be toys there, not just comics. But I wanted to show, I'm going to get drawing here in a few minutes, but I did want to show you a couple cool things that I dug out. So when I was going through the paper and I was looking for some blank sheets, I came across this, and I don't know if I'd shown this before. This was an unused cover for Bionicle Ignition #1. This was Thock climbing out of his original can. And I know that early on when I was working on the Bionicles, as with the poster for issue 0, the Zamor Sphere and the Zamor Sphere launcher was sort of a really new thing. And so when I could work that in, I know the Lego people really like that. And I know that's what's going on here, why Thock has got his arm up so prominently presenting the sphere. Anyway, it's nice to see this stuff. Here's the canister in the back. I don't remember how it came to be that he was climbing out of the canister instead of having it in the back. That may have been Lego's idea, may have been mine. I tried to keep every little bit of paper, scrap, email, anything that would help tell the story, but some of these things get lost to time. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying seeing a few gems that don't normally come out. That's why you tune in, right? Anyway, tonight, I think the guy I'm going to try to draw is this guy here, and he's great because he's front and center on the cover to Bionicle Ignition 3. And I remember when I was very specifically when I was working on this issue, typically I was asked by DC and Lego to turn in like 3 to 5 good cover sketches, concepts, and they would pick the one they wanted. And I think for this issue, I really, because we were introducing the new line of the Toa, and they told me they wanted this one to be the prominent lead character represented. I had this layout, and it was the first one I came up with, and I thought, I'm not going to come up with anything better than this. I just knew it was the right one. So I turned it in, and I said, I'll make more if you want them, but I think this is the right cover. And the funny thing is, I think of all the ones I proposed for the entire series, this was the one that people got most excited over and immediately said, that's the cover, just do that. Sometimes you have a good idea, and when you know it, you just go with it. Okay, so I'm going to dive in. I'm going to change my camera, and I'm going to talk about how I like to draw this guy here. This is going to be exciting. You guys can steal all my good techniques here. I need my pencil, and you're going to get to see me ink this too. And I'm going to tell you, I took a bath not long ago, and when I'm done, I'm going to need to take another one because I always get lots of ink every place. So to set this up, I should have this other camera here. I'm going to change my camera view, and I'm going to hope that you guys are still going to be able to hear and see me okay. If you don't, somebody make a posting in the comments, okay? I'm going to trust you on this. Let's see if this works. How about, look at that. Well, you've got that Stuart Sayger logo right in the middle. I wonder if I can move that. I used to know how to do this. At the meantime, I'm going to have to leave that there. There's a way to, I'm using OBS, and there's a way to lock and unlock this layer, and I'm trying to remember how to do it. Lock preview, can that be it? That's what it's related to. Nope, I thought I had it. I can do that. How's that? I'll turn it off and on a little bit. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to get started here. If you guys have any problems seeing any of this or have any questions while I'm working, let me know. So first things first, as stated before, we have to have a sheet of the DC board. Here's the funny thing. This is the wrong board. This is the right board. How did I get this? Okay, so it's hard for you guys to see this, but the one on top is the rough board. The one on the bottom is the smooth board. Oh, and they're different sizes. This is weird. Look, the smooth board is smaller. I wonder if that meant that the pages I drew actually had more art on the sides that were chopped off, because I typically drew Bionicle to the entire edge of the page. Someone should look into this. Seems like it should probably be me, but we're not going to do it today. Oh, and here's the other thing. They've got different logos on them. So DC at one point must have changed the size of their board, and when they changed the printing. But either way, I'm going to use this board here. It's the rough board. It's what I typically worked on. Yeah, and look at this. The crop marks are different. Can you guys see that? I don't know what's going on there, but they're definitely different. I'm working on the old board, the rough board, which is what I typically drew Bionicle on, but I'm flipping it over onto the back. Got my model here. Now I tell everybody, and I always get so many pained looks. Lego was nice enough to send me all the Bionicles for free. I had a kitchen full of them. I say kitchen because I drew in my dining room, and I had kitchen cabinets that I just stuck the Bionicles in, and I had notes around all of their necks so I could tell who they were. And you see, you'd think you wouldn't forget, but if you ever start drawing one or get it in your head that you've remembered who somebody is and you get it wrong, you're in real trouble. Because if I drew the wrong character, I would absolutely have to redraw it and put the right character in. And at some point, you can really fall behind your deadline. And so I always label all of them just better safe than sorry. Right? Sounds good. I should tell you this too. I'm really flattered that everybody brought me back. I'm really flattered that everybody brought me back for World Bionicle Day is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to draw and speak at the same time. And I say that because yesterday I was in Connecticut for well, it was a Terrificon. And Terrificon was a great comic book convention, but I had already been booked for it from like a year out, and I didn't even realize that it was going to overlap with World Bionicle Day. And so I talked to Liam and I said, I'd love to be a part of this. I don't know what availability I'm going to have, if we can move things around so that I can still do the convention and be a part of the World Bionicle feed. And we managed to make it work. So I'm here on Monday. It's not the 10th, but I think you guys would probably let me do this any day, wouldn't you? By the way, I want somebody to put in the comments, what is it that makes Axon not as popular as Piraka? Because I really like Axon, and not everybody, but so many people say Piraka is just the best, and I want to hear what makes Piraka so good. Not that I don't like him, but I really like Axon. Now, you see I cut it in and I'm chopping pretty quickly with the way I draw. This is not too, this is really pretty typical for me. I like to do this stuff pretty quick as gestural drawings, and I may come back in and tighten it up later. Or I might not. I know a lot of you know how I can just say, the energy of the thing is more important than the details. I know I drove some of you guys crazy. I've been very fortunate. A lot of Bionicle fans who are 10 years old have now turned into well-read, smart, sophisticated 30-year-olds who've been kind enough to come to me as an adult and say that they actually had developed an appreciation for abstract or looser art, with me being kind of an introduction for that. And I'm very flattered to hear those kind of things, because, again, I think Lego actually really stuck their neck out to make Bionicle look like this. I know there were some times when, Lego wasn't just the financial juggernaut that it is today. Some years were a little bit leaner, and when a company gets in that situation, sometimes they get really cautious, sometimes they get really adventuresome, and they do some interesting things. And I've long wondered if this Bionicle series, in using somebody like me, would have come out any other year than when it did. I think Lego was looking for something different, and they got it. I'm going to check to see if I have any questions here. Chad on our end is also saying Golden Mask design spikes, and some are also saying his backstory and villain arc. I don't know what you're talking about, Liam. I'm so sorry. Chad on our end is also saying Gold Mask design spikes, and some are also saying his backstory and villain arc. Oh, you mean as far as why Piraka's better? Well, I don't know. Backstory is hard to look past. If you like the backstory, that goes a long, long way. What advice do you have to young artists who want to pursue a similar comic illustration career? I'm asked by Steve. I'll tell you what. If you decide you want to make comics, you need to do it because you love it. If what you want is to have a whole lot of money in a giant house, you can still do that through comics, but it might be easier if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a computer programmer, something like that. But if you have the creative bug in you, and this is what you want to do, number one, no one can stop you from doing it. And I really encourage people to sort of recognize that you kind of have to make your own luck. I self-published comic books to start my career. I was actually approached by DC Comics to try out for Lego Bionicle based on the strength of a self-published comic I did. I've said this several times. I never thought there was any way I was going to get this job. And that was basically because I was convinced that Lego really wanted somebody with a really clean, crisp art style, and that was not me. When I was asked to try out for it, they promised me that they were looking for something different. And I even had my doubts, to the extent where I asked them if I got paid to try out, and they said yes. And I thought, okay, I may as well do it then. Just before making my piece, though, I was convinced that I needed to still make a really clean, crisp piece of art, mainly because everything I'd seen that Lego and Bionicle had ever been was really crisp, clean art. And even though they told me they wanted something different, it was kind of hard for me to believe it. So then when it came time for me to actually make my piece, I was actually going to try to make a really clean piece of art, but I thought if I did, and I got the job from it, I probably wouldn't be able to reproduce clean, crisp pieces of art day in, day out. So at the last minute, I decided I was going to make whatever I thought was the coolest piece I could make, and hope that Lego would read with me. So some of the advice I have to give is, be willing to sort of work in styles that aren't what you normally do, but also recognize what the strength of what your art style is. If you want to draw comic books, best thing you can do is to make a comic book. I got this job because I had self-published some comics and sort of shown the world that I could make the deadlines and have my own fans. It was my self-published comic book, as I said, that made its way to DC, and then obviously DC decided to have me asked me to try out for the job, and that my samples were then passed on to Lego. Now, I didn't ever know that was going to happen. All I tried to do was make the best comic book I could. Almost every job I've gotten in comics, I can't believe this is the case, and I don't know if this is typical for other people, but almost every job I've gotten in comics is a job that I've been asked to do rather than a job that I somehow sought or applied for. I had applied for jobs, but it seemed that editors and such, they liked my work, but they weren't really hiring me. They'd say, like what you're doing, let me see what you do next, make some other samples. And it didn't take long for I thought, I don't want to make any more samples. I want to just write and draw my own comic books. And I really thought this, and I really believe it. I don't know that this is true, but this is my attitude. If I wanted to draw Batman or Spider-Man, something like that, the obvious thing is you should make some Batman or Spider-Man samples, right? Well, I also thought, if I make whatever pages of Frankenstein and the Batman editor says these look incredible, he won't say I can't hire him because they're not Batman. He'll know that I can draw Batman. So what I did was I said, why don't I just make what I like? And, if the work is good, any reasonable editor should be able to see past that and see how my work would apply to whatever character they're working on. You're going to excuse me. I'm going to get a glass of water. Give me just a moment. I'm back. I should have known better. And I say that because this is a Facebook show, and I very rarely do a Facebook show without a San Pellegrino. So what was I thinking? So if you can see how I'm inking this, one of the things that's kind of interesting is I just kind of guessed it, not guessed, but I just sort of blocked out a lot of the shapes. You see where the blades are inked relative to where the pencils are. The lines, I'm not matching my lines very exactly. I kind of feel like the thing is a constantly floating work in progress. I want there to be some spontaneity and life to my lines. So if I draw this in a really tight manner, I think it kills the spring to the line. I'm also drawing some of the key shapes, and I'm not connecting every line. I can come back later and connect all this, but if I can hit some of the sort of key markers, I get those in place, and then I can move on from there. All right, here's the trick. This head, you can cut corners on a lot of things, but you can't cut corners on our heads. You got to get the heads right on these characters. And in fact, this is where the Bionicles are kind of great, because I can do this and just take it off. I can really study it a lot better this way. Let's see. Got to remind myself he's got this underbite here. I'd like to kind of show that. This is angled. Now, one of the things you guys maybe don't know about regarding how I work is that I will use a lot of ink, black ink, but also use a lot of white paint. And I will stack my lights and darks on top of each other to get the look I want. Well, why does that matter? Well, one of the reasons it matters is if I have white paint, I can put black down and just have big, thick, heavy black and decide to change my mind. I'm not a slave to any mark I put down. I can treat this as a painting and build it up as I go. That's kind of how I choose to work. Look how much I decided to move where his spikes were on the side of his head. Why did I do that? It changes proportions. I tilted his head down a little bit when I drew it. And when you do that, the spikes line up differently on his head. I've also drawn his head a little bit wider, or not quite as wide as the toy actually is. So I might actually beef this up just a little bit when I put in the blacks on it. The other thing is, I'm trying to work a little bit faster than I normally work, right? You guys don't want to see me pull out a circle compass and measure all this out. You want to sort of see how the approach works. But the other funny thing is, I'm a little bit out of practice drawing these guys. And why wouldn't I be? You know, I used to draw them for hours and hours, you know, all the time. I'd get a script and I'd really have to attack it. Typically you do a warm-up drawing just in general, just to get the skills limbered up. And I didn't do any of that today, just sat down and started working. So the funny thing is, typically what'll happen is when I dive in like this, the work will get better once I'm warmed up. Sometimes it doesn't. Maybe I'll just be lousy all day. I do know, and it was kind of hard to hear, but I had to accept it. I drew in such a different style that I knew there were going to be people who missed the artists who came before me. I knew there were also going to be some who really liked me, found me fresh and different. My thing throughout was I wanted to do something I thought was interesting, and the only way to really do that was to do something that hadn't come before me. So what do you think? How's it looking thus far? It's kind of blocked out. Kind of blocked out. But what I'm going to do here is, and this is where if you haven't seen me do one of these before, it'll get kind of exciting. Typically I give this sort of a light eraser, a dusting. Some of the things I know I don't want, like those ears have been, or those spikes in the place of ears that have really been moved, I'll obliterate them completely. But the rest is I'll erase kind of lightly. I still may want some of the guidelines there, but I don't want them dominating and fighting the inks. And this is how I'll typically draw something, whether it's Bionicle or otherwise. So about to this point, this is when I'll start to come in and start using some heavier blacks. A pen that I like to use is this Faber-Castell Pitt pen. It's a really affordable brush tip drawing pen. Very often mine have blue tape on them added to this. That is a marker for me to let me know that the edge on it isn't quite as sharp as I might like it to be. Sometimes I'll take these, and here you see that one is much sharper than this other one. You typically want a sharp one if you want a great line. The funny thing is, when I draw on this rough paper, this Lego or this DC paper that was rough just obliterated the points on these pens. So sometimes I would use a rough pen a little bit longer than I might otherwise have used, just because they get worn down so quickly. I should probably put his head back on here so I'm drawing one composite thing. One of the things that's also interesting and hard to draw on these Legos is you see his chest here. It's got a lot of different facets on it. You want to have some of those be dark and some of them be light. You really want to show some detail on these, and so a good way to do that is you'll have some of the angles be light and some will be dark, so that they appear to be at different angles to one another. And if you really are interested in how that affects how the character looks, a great thing to look at is the very first Star Wars movie. I'm not making this up. This is really exciting. The original Darth Vader helmet. For the filming of the movie, they painted it to where it had alternating facets that were either matte finish or gloss. And so that way when light would hit it, it wasn't all glossing or all flat. It would always be lit with half of it flat, half it glossy. And what that did was it made it have a lot of relief. I don't know who had that idea, but they earned their money that day. Because if you think about it, enough of Star Wars was filmed on blue strings and things like that. If you had anything that was true black, it's really easy to to drop out and just be lost completely. It was not what they were going to want for that movie. Also, I don't know if you can see this this marker that I'm using. I'm putting it down, and it is making a mark that is it looks like it's evaporating under my nose, and what it actually is it's soaking into the paper. This DC paper was so thirsty. It's a term that we use in the art field. A paper that really draws ink quickly is said to be thirsty. You guys think thirsty means something else. This is another Pitt pen, but it's gray. And I don't normally work like this. When I did Lego Bionicle, I didn't use a grayscale marker like this. But it occurs to me for a presentation piece like this, it's nice to have because I've got a character that's black, and I really can't have him be flat black. If I do that, it won't capture any of the detail. So I can come in with this marker and hit a lot of these, a lot of the figure, and just make it a neutral value. The paper will be my white, the blacks will be my black, but then just by laying this down for a lot of it, I get this sort of third tone. And what's great about the style I work in is I don't mind if I hit these blacks. I can pick up some of the black with the gray and smear it, and I get this sort of like painted-like effect. And then the secret weapon is, even after I've done that, I can always come back with some white paint or more black ink and work opaquely, so I can sort of treat it almost like a sculpture. I'm starting off with some really rudimentary marks and then tightening, tightening, and tightening, and tightening. And you can do that when you mix your lights and darks on top of each other. Okay, what do you think? Is it taking form? I hope it is. Let's see. I've got another version, another pen here. You can see I've got a 3 I can choose from. This is a black, a light gray, and a dark gray. The other thing you should consider is the paper is white. And even without that, I'm going to use this white Presto pen. So I can come back and add white to this at any time. But what I like to do, and this is what's going to surprise everybody, if you haven't seen me draw before, Maura's watching, she'll say she's seen this 100 times. The pen that I like to use is this Sharpie pen, and I like to use a makeup sponge. I can actually load the makeup sponge up with the ink and dilute it with some water. And you can see how it splashed down here? It's kind of diluted. I can actually use the sponge like this and make some nice, great sort of wet, smoky effects with it. I'll even cut it with a little bit of saliva if I have to. But the way I worked and anchored all that gray there on top of this main character, it's the same thing as doing the background here. I'm just going away from white to a neutral value, and I can, once I'm at neutral, I can still darken it with a black, or I can add white to make it highlight. When you're at white, you can only make things darker, but when you're in the middle value, you can, put your object more into shadow or bring it out more to the foreground. Let's see. Now, I know it seemed like I just painted all over his claw there. Oh, you guys didn't get to see it too well. I'm so sorry. See if I can change my angle just a little bit. That's a little bit. I want you to be able to see what I'm working on here. Even though I just worked through all those claws, I still, again, I'm going to put some highlight in and pull them out, but I want the atmosphere around the claws. I don't want to draw around the claws. I want the claws in it. So the best way to do that is to just layer these things. And once I've got a baseline down of all my inks, I can add highlights. Yeah, this is a little wetter now. Yep, that looks pretty good. So now from here, I'm pretty far along. Let's think about where I want some lights and darks to be. By the way, I should read some other questions. Let's see, do you have any other techniques for lighting scenarios? This is perfect. Like, if it's a different time of day, how do you figure out how to angle the light? You know, there are, lighting is really, really important in drawing, period. In fact, it's especially important the way I draw. My basic rule when I am trying to teach anybody how to draw is to remind them that you're not really drawing the object. You're not drawing the physical thing. You're trying to draw the light it reflects. So everything you're doing is always light, 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 light every time. Excuse me. And then once you have that down, the first thing you should consider is that all light is relative. Okay? When we draw on a piece of paper like this, we tend to think of the paper as white. Well, the reality is it's probably not as white as you think it is. You know, here's another piece of paper that might be whiter. Here's some head earbuds here. I know they're whiter. So it looks like this is white until you have something whiter next to it. Well, if you don't have anything whiter next to it, then this really does become your brightest area. The mind and the eye will always tell you that is your white. And why that is so important is that if you have a white and you have a black, your gray, whatever gray you have, will kind of automatically feel like the mid value. It might be that this gray is actually closer to halfway between the white and the black, but if you only have one, it'll almost always feel like it's the mid value. Okay? If you want anything to look really bright, best way to do it is you put a whole bunch of black areas around it, and then vice versa. Anything you want to look dark, you put, or you leave a lot of light around it. So what I'm going to do on this, I want this to be dramatic. I've got a character who inherently is black. The mistake a lot of people would do would make is just to fill them all in black, and you never want to do that because, again, your lighting is all relative. It's not absolute. Well, parts of him reflect, and even though he's all black, the parts that reflect are lighter than his natural black color. So even a character who's black like this has really all the values from white to black available. It's up to you to sort of pick out where they are. What I often like to do is say, okay, is there anything on this that has to be light or has to be dark? And to me, the eyes are going to glow on him, so they have to be light no matter what. And that's a great place for me to start to figure out how I'm going to manage my lighting. So I've pulled the head off. I remember that these eyes are sunk in here a little bit. I'll draw those in. Those are going to be my white areas. They're not white right now because I smeared the paint over them. But as I said, we can go back in and add white paint and lighten them up. So that's what I'm going to do later. But before I do that, let's really darken everything in around it, because if I want that those eyes to really be bright, my rule is everything around it has to be dark. This is looking crazy, but I think it's going to work. You guys may have your doubts, but I always say, judge me when it's done. You can judge. Oh, look at that. See, this is going to work. I'm going to give you a hint of how well it's going to work. I'm going to hold this up so you can really get a good look at him. Right? Well, I can still darken it up a little bit with this mid-tone. I don't want to go flat black because I don't want to lose those details. That should be darker there. That should be darker there. A lot of this chest plate is darker. Not all of it. I'm picking selective planes out that sort of alternate. I left a light in the middle here. Why? Really, because it's the part that's closest to you. One side of the blade is going to be dark, so the top will stand out. Darken that up. Have a little bit of a drop shadow off each one. That looks good. But the more I sort of commit to individual planes and shapes, lights and darks, I can really have him jump out. Let's see what I need to do here yet still. Okay. I think I still have too much light on some of this head in certain areas and not enough in others. So I'm going to commit to the areas that are going to be dark. Now, I've gotten that pretty dark. And at some point you'd say, well, isn't that dark enough? Didn't you say don't go all the way black? I did. but you see I've got a lot of gray. We can still see lines. And I have yet to introduce the white paint to it. So let's pull out his head here. And the white paint becomes really, really, really valuable. So for this one, I think he's going to be lit from over here. He'll have some sort of light source there. By the way, you also asked me, somebody asked me about lights and darks and sunlight. Sunlight is almost always up above. Noon, the sun is supposed to be straight above a character. I typically think that lighting from straight up above is kind of boring. Lighting from one side or two sides is more interesting. And typically, if you want something really dramatic or horrific, you put the light under it. I don't think we're going to do that with this figure, but just the side will be dramatic enough. So here's what I'm doing. I'm looking at the planes that sort of stand out on him that would be likely to catch light from this other area. And what I'm using here is a whiteout pen. By the way, if you ever use one of these and you struggle with it, one of the things I want you to know about is the temperature of the ink in these really affects how well it flows. And one of the reasons the temperature affects it is not only the paint more viscous, but this becomes pressurized. The heat of your hand will pressurize it. I'll often hold it upside down, squeeze it, and make it sputter to get the air out of it. And if I do it, you might be able to hear it. So let's be quiet for a sec. Do you hear it? It's bowed now. You can see I've squeezed it. It's not going to flow as well. Well, why does that matter? Well, I get a thinner line when it doesn't flow as well. I actually have more control over it. I can hit these highlights better. And what's funny is I've actually had these sometimes where they're just not behaving, and I put them in the refrigerator just to cool them down. Seems kind of funny, doesn't it? Now, the other thing I have to do is these parts of his eyes that glow, gotta have those be a true white. If all lighting is relative, whatever is supposed to be bright, you have to make it white. Even if it's normally red, you know, if the red is the brightest part of it, you have to commit to that being white, because the eye is used to sort of, on a black and white drawing that says, whatever is the brightest area, you have to have it be white, because essentially, if you're in a dark room and everything is dark, your eyes will dilate. You'll still have a sense of what is light and what is dark in a relatively low lighting environment. He's also hollow in a few spots. Not hollow, but these holes go through him. So I want to show that the light goes through him there. Also, watch this. This shoulder is a nice plane where if we look at it, it would really reflect a lot of light to us if the light is coming from over here, because it's a nice flat plane. It's a lot of times something can look really, really bright if the light hits it is only a glancing light. If the light were coming from directly above it, most of the light would bounce straight back up, not at our eye. But if it's hitting an object that's flat, it doesn't have to bounce at a steep angle to come up and hit us. Well, when that happens, that means it'll be an area that's really, really bright. And if I want that thing to look really, really bright, as I said, all the stuff around it I have to make dark. So I'm really adding all that in there just to give myself a point of contrast for when I come back in here and cut in these highlights. And I will even drag them with my finger and get some nice sort of painterly shines. This will be another one. Just like so. See that little bit right there? I didn't like that. Well, guess what? I can fix it. I can turn that whole shoulder into a silhouette. In fact, I'm going to. Now, I turned that into a silhouette. That actually pushed it further back away from him. Visually, it seems like it's receding more. Those are the sort of things that we think of when we're drawing these characters. What are some opportunities where we can trick the eye into seeing something one way or the other? You know, I tell a lot of people and they just act like I'm crazy, but I say, I want you to think about what the eye does when it looks at something. If you have a really bright object and it's above, you're outside and it's above your head, you know, if you're looking at the sun and it's a clear day, the sun is going to be much brighter than that light object. Well, because of the relative value of the sunlight and the bright object will look dark. The reason it'll look dark is the brightness of the sun will make your eye contract. Not the cornea. What's what I'm looking for? Not the lens. The aperture in the eye will contract. And so one of the things you're doing is you're looking for a way to draw in a manner that mimics what the eye will do. And if you can do that well, people look at your work and they'll say, wow, that's really good lighting. How did you do that? Well, your brain saw it. And when your brain is used to seeing things lit that well, it comes to a certain conclusion. I have led you there already. But I got to tell you, I said earlier that I had moved to drawing on harder paper rather than this rough stuff. And I got to tell you, boy, right now I am absolutely blown away by how rough this stuff is. I hadn't worked on this regularly for a long time. And the DC paper was rougher than any other paper I worked on. So it is right now destroying my art supplies. It's just that rough. It's like drawing on sandpaper. There's his head again. I got to get these teeth right. Here's what's great. I can come in here and just paint that in. And someone will say, but wait a minute, you left out his teeth that stick down. Well, because I'm working light on dark and stacking them, I can put the teeth that hang down at any moment. I just have to paint them in opaquely with black. Let's get some light on the top of that spike there. We'll put some highlights and reflective spots. Little dots are great at making that happen. Things look really shiny when you do that. I'm also coming in and doing something that I like to do, and that is, see how I blackened all that out or whited all that out? I actually made a really interesting silhouette there. His shoulder is standing up against a darker background. Now I chase it, and that becomes sort of a separation of objects there, because one is a strong silhouette of white against a strong silhouette of black. Let's put his teeth back in here. That's looking a little bit better. What do you guys think? Do you recognize him a little bit? I hope. It's close. I haven't drawn him for a while. I can tell that some of my proportions are a little bit off, but usually I'm not this far off. I mean, I know I've taken some slack from some BIONICLE fans for saying that I really push the characters, but I don't normally push them this far. Let's see. Now, this is pretty far along as one of these things would go. Let's see, what could I do to add some fun to it? What if I want this blade to really shine? Let's put some highlights on it. Those are the places where the light reflects. There's an artist I really admire named Bob Peak. He drew the movie poster for Star Trek The Motion Picture. He did some Olympic ice skating and other events, stamps. Nice job you get. He did movie posters for West Side Story and Hair and all kinds of things. And one of the things he really sort of figured out was certain cameras would create when you photograph something, if you've got a really highly reflective portion, you get this sort of 4-point reflection. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he would put these X's on things. And when you do it repeatedly, oops, there we go. It sort of mimics the look you'd get from that kind of camera lens. So sometimes I do that and I really get it from Bob Peak, but it kind of makes a really cool effect very quickly, very easily. See how that looks? Let's add some more to him. He should have one up here. And you always want to keep the lines parallel. because that is what the lens on the camera would do. Tricky thing is this pen doesn't really flow like a regular pen. So you have to squeeze it just enough to get it to flow and not so much that it flows too heavily and you get this big thick line. That will not make your art look good. A sort of perfect little dollop. You had no idea he was this shiny, did you? There's a little bit of math you play with for sort of deciding where all the shines are going to go. But with some practice, you can sort of figure out that my light source was up here. I've determined that from these highlights that I put on this helmet. You know, I've sort of given you the visual clues to let you know that's where the light source is, because those things are illuminated, and I'll put another one here. I'll really play that up. Once I've done that, you kind of believe, okay, the light source has got to be up there. But that added a lot of depth to him. If I want to add some atmosphere in a hurry, here's a great trick. People always wondered how I did this. You'll get to see. This is one of my favorite tools. I don't use it as much as I used to, but when you want to use it, it works great. It's a sponge that's, or excuse me, it's a toothbrush that's loaded with white paint. I like to use this stuff called Pro White, which I think is a process white. What that means is it's, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it was originally used for like film correction and such. It's supposed to be really thick and opaque. I dilute it, but it still has a very sort of thick, almost chalky at times body. You can see off of the sponge, I can flick it off. It's a little thick right now still. So I'm malling it around. There we go. See how it's flicking off on my hand? I can have that splatter in a few spots, particularly on really dark areas, and create some atmosphere. Now sometimes I'll load up the brush, hold out another pen and strike it against it, and it'll make it come off in dollops like that. And what's cool is because you're working opaquely like this, see this arm? Just by putting a little bit in front of it, look how I pushed that whole arm back. This one didn't get as much. That looks like atmosphere that is behind this arm and in front of that arm. So where you put it matters, where you leave it off matters just as much. A little bit up there on that glint. I also like to use this stuff to smear around by my hand if I want some more naturalistic effects. Look at that. That looks like a glint, but it also looks like there's like some smoke or atmosphere not too far off. You know, anything that allowed these things to look a little bit more natural, that's what I always went for when I was drawing them. I was constantly saying, well, you know, this is how they'd get bent. This is how they get dirty. This is how they'd interact in their world. And for the most part, Toby Dutkowitz went for it. I don't think Greg Farshty was too involved with how I made them look. He was really good at sort of dictating what was going to happen, but the visual choices were made by somebody else. Let's put a little bit down here, just to kind of break up that hard line. I think I want, see how his hand comes in front here. I don't want that quite so dark behind him. And I don't want it so clearly defined. I'm actually using a little bit of saliva to sort of dilute the paint that right there. Same way here. I want that hand to come forward. So if I have the hand have really clean, hard lines, and I have what's behind it be kind of cloudy, it'll visually look like there's a separation between the two. See how that works? That really helped make that hand come out, didn't it? That's the kind of stuff we're always talking about doing. How we can sort of come up with a look that sort of mimics what the eye is already going to see or do. And that is pretty much how I drew the Bionicle. I would then scan this, adjust the levels a little bit to make the blacks a true black where they need to be. A couple places where the whites were broken, like on this really thick paint on his mouth, I might correct it before I'd scan it like this. Or if I hadn't noticed it ahead of time, I could fix that digitally. I might also come in, let this dry, and I'm not going to let it dry. I'm just going to go ahead and do it right now to show you. So I might run a pen or two doing this. But I could add some details here, like a silhouette of that shoulder piston, which would add some nice depth to this. You know, just to define a few little things here or there, really add a lot. You know, so I'm going to make everybody really mad here, but, you know, I always kind of felt like these things don't have to be as accurate to the toy as some might like them to be, but what I thought I needed was a drawing that was convincing. I always wanted to show movement, I always wanted to show depth, I always wanted to show life. So like one of the things that I'm going to do here that is absolutely off model is we've got his torso here and his arm. I've got a really strong and interesting silhouette here, but I kind of feel like if I had just something connecting the two, like a piston, like that, it would give it such a different sense of depth. Or if I had his center of his chest not be as obscured as this other part of his chest is slightly further back. So I might come in and just blacken this out just a little bit. Now, he really wouldn't have his chest stick out quite that much more in that area than the other side, but by giving it that greater contrast and defining that line relative to the thing that's immediately next to it, it feels like it's standing out more. And so that's what I always want to do, is find a way to sort of cheat and make these things have depth, have focus, figure out what's important, what's not, how to mimic what light is doing, how light would reflect. Yep. Anyway, that's how I drew my Bionicles. Now, see all that splatter on there? I'm fine with all of it. One little blotch I don't like because it's running my lighting. And I'm going to fix it, and I want you to watch it and tell me if it looks better before or after I've done it. That one right there on his cheek, that is screwing up that nice silhouette shape of his head. So I'm going to see how dry it is. It's drier than I want it to be. I was hoping I can get some of it off, but I can just cover that up. Yep, now his head comes forward more. And those are the little corrections that I'll make going back and forth to pull things in, bringing them forward, pushing them back. Let's see. Martino Bass, in Stuart's minds, how do these guys look? Glossy matte, metal, battle damaged. I always feel like that they are always as living as can be. As we get older, we all get scars. We all age, whatever. I always wanted them to look as human as possible, or not human, look as lifelike as possible. And that's why things like this, these spikes probably are supposed to be parallel, but having them a little bit off make them a little bit more naturalistic. You know, almost nobody likes the way they look in a photograph, and that's because most people are only used to seeing themselves in the mirror. You get used to seeing yourself the way you are in the mirror, and when you see yourself in the photograph, you are actually seeing a flipped image from what you're used to, and that flipped image is pointing out to your brain all the ways in which your facial features are imbalanced. Well, every animal has that. And so if you're drawing animals, you know, lions and tigers and leopards that all have marks and spots, they aren't perfectly symmetrical. You want a little bit off. It's what makes it look lifelike. So stuff like that never bothered me. Lego let me get away with it a little bit, but there were times they'd say that is too much. It was kind of helpful though too, because I think I could go crazy. They could give me, you know, if they just let me do anything, you know, I could really deviate too far. Have I ever drawn Death's Head or Death's Head 2? I feel like you'd nail those characters. Man, I was just the right age. I should have drawn them. I remember when they came out, I think Liam Sharp drew Death's Head, and I've actually met him and had dinner with him a few times. He uses a lot of heavy blacks like I do. Our line work is very different, but our sort of strong sense of lights and heavy blacks is similar. So I think I would be good at Death's Head. Let's see, what else we have here? If we have any other questions, give them to me. Any concerns about AI taking over art? Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I can't go down the rabbit hole about talking about AI because it would just dominate everything. But I will tell you this: you're going to be using more AI than you ever thought, and what'll be scary is you're going to be engaging with it in times that you weren't expecting or that you didn't know you were using AI. And I actually think it's going to be healthy in the future for people to sort of give themselves hobbies and things to do that they know can't use AI. Something like drawing at a table like this, playing an acoustic guitar, something where you are doing everything, and you'll have a sense of complete control over your environment, even if you can't do it well. You know, there are times I draw and the drawing doesn't come out the way I want, but what I end up with is an honest response and creation that I've come up with. I think that'll be a healthy balance against a world where, you know, AI is telling us which news stories to read and what food to eat and what clothes are going to be most comfortable. Let's see. Scott McCarthy. How are you, Scott McCarty? Yeah, Scott, it was nice to see you at San Diego. Are you going to go to New York? I hope to see you there. By the way, Scott, you might have been one of the few people who really got to see the really nice axon that I brought to San Diego. I posted on my Facebook and Instagram page about a week before the show. It was a big, really nice 14 by 17 original that was painted. Now, it was painted sort of in this approach, but this was fast. You saw how quickly I hacked this out, and I told stories through all of it. That axon was just top-notch stuff. It was as nice as any Bionicle piece I've ever... It probably was the nicest Bionicle piece I've ever made. It was sold. I know that somebody who's a longtime Bionicle fan has it, and if you do some poking around on the internet, I'll bet the owner has probably posted it someplace, so you should look it up. Yeah, no problem. I am feeling a little bit sick from the show, so I'm trying to catch up. Let's see. Was it difficult to draw the comics when the toys were simultaneously being made? Yeah, it was very difficult in that they often didn't have the toys made. There were times I had to leave holes in the art and hope that the toys arrived on time. There's a pretty famous story I've told several times about Axon and Brutaka not arriving. You guys probably have already heard it, but the short version is that nobody knew what they looked like. I mean, I couldn't even leave holes in the art because I didn't know if Axon and Brutaka were two twins or if they looked like dogs or crabs. I had no idea. So we really were up against it on that. I finally got a call from someone at Lego USA saying, okay, Axon and Brutaka exist. And I said, what do they look like? And they said, I don't know. There's only one set, and it's in Denmark, and they're going to send it to you overnight. FedEx. I had to go to the airport and pick it up. And I had to sign every non-disclosure agreement you can think of. But I had in my hands the very first very first Vizon and Fenrak made. I raced home. I filled them in as best I could in the panels where I left space. Thankfully, one of them was humanoid. That really helped. But there had to be some panels that were redrawn for sure. Anyway, give me some other questions if you have anything, because we're probably going to do this for about another 15 minutes. This drawing is done, and I had a blast. I'm always flattered you guys bring me back for World Bionicle Day. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think this was as good as what I drew last year or the year before. And I am going to chalk that up to the fact that I am actually under the weather from this last convention I did, and I didn't get into bed until about 4 a.m. last night, thanks to a delayed flight. But this was important. I wanted to come. I wanted to take it seriously. And I know for a lot of you, this is the first time you saw me do any of this. So this began life as just a blank sheet of paper. You know, these things, some of them I can draw a little bit out of my head, but you've got to have some reference. I think the proportions on his head could have been a little bit better, but I think this character is still quite recognizable. And there were times, luckily, thanks to the modders of Photoshop, the marvel of Photoshop, that if this were close to model but not quite on model, I could probably stretch and pull and redraw part of it digitally and get it to where I want it to match the likeness a little bit better. But I'm actually fairly pleased with it. Let's see, do we have any other questions I can address? I will tell you this, like I said, please, please, please look me up and follow me on my social media. Go to either, look for me under Stuart Sayger, just as my name is spelled behind my head, on either Facebook or Instagram. I'm pretty certain I'm the only person who has that name, because I am going to do a really involved follow-up Facebook and Instagram show for BIONICLE in about a week or 10 days. I'll announce when it is. But the reason you guys want to tune in, I'm going to have cool things like this to show you. I can tell you what this is. And if that's not enough, I'll have cool things like this to show you. And many, many, many more. I just don't have time to do all of it today. Today was specifically about how I draw the stuff, and I wanted to give you a good example, and I think you got a good sense of that. So let's see. Which of the 7 Piraka we got in the set from is your favorite? Oh, that is easy. That is Hakan. Hakan is my favorite. Red is my favorite color. I lobbied for him to be the lead Piraka on the poster, and they went for it. Red is really cool because red doesn't disturb your night vision. You can look at something that's illuminated red, and your eyes don't really contract the way they would if you looked at blue light. So really oddly, I don't know why instrument panels on all cars aren't in red. It would actually be much safer than those bright bluish white lights. But I took to Hakan right away. I love that big underbite. I thought he was the one who looked most aggressive. There was just something so spirited about him. When I got them all at once, and it was awful. You're not supposed to feel this way, but it was like a litter of puppies, and you're like, you instantly are attracted to one of them sometimes. In the case of Hakan, he was the winner. Let's see if we have any other questions. Yes, boy, I'm so glad you guys are all tuning in from seeing me at Terrificon. Terrificon was such a blast. Could you tell that I was starting to get sick at Terrificon? Nothing I could do about it, but I felt it coming on. I'm tough. I pushed on through. Do we have any other questions here for the last 10 minutes? By the way, I didn't get to see the collector cards for the World Bionicle Day. Does anybody have them? I cannot wait to get my set. I know Liam got a hold of me and wanted to put a photo on the back. And I know that on the back, I managed to find an unused photo from Lego Bionicle number 0. If you guys remember that issue, there was an interview with me when I had my blonde hair and it was spiked up. I found an alternate photo. So if you have your Bionicle 0 and you get the card, you can put them next to each other and you can see the change in moments from one to the other. Let's see. What else have we got here? You guys better give me another question or else I'm going to start wrapping this up. Let's see. Got lighting techniques. I'm scrolling back through to see what I missed. Let's see. Yeah, it really sounds like Piraka's are everybody's favorite over Axon. Wait, wasn't that smooth board? Steve asked me about the board I drew on. No, I don't know what it was. I'm really drawing on all smooth board now, and one of the reasons I like smooth board, well, one of the reasons I always liked rough board was I would layer my inks and paints on top of each other, and when you've got a rough surface, it'll hold the materials better. I think that's why a lot of people paint on canvas. Now, if you're drawing on a smooth board, you can get a crisper, cleaner line. You can also draw with pencil and have it really grip and hold its spot. It's harder to erase because if it's a rough surface, you can erase and knock a little bit off, and you can put graphite down on top of it. Whereas if you have a really hard surface, it just doesn't erase off. It just stays there. But as I've gotten better, as I've gotten older, I like that I can have more control. I don't need to erase as much. I'm actually moving away from being quite so rough and painterly on the paper. I've learned how to get a lot of the effects I want and be a little bit more careful. I don't need the paper to be as rough. So I can then at least experience the benefits of a harder surface that will hold its line. Let's see. Let's see. Send the card on D. Oh, cool. I can't wait to see the card. Thank you so much. And then what's it say here? And here's the unboxing video for the whole set. Oh, so cool. I can't wait to see that. I think it's really cool you did these sets. So let's do this. I don't know. I've only got a few minutes left for World Bionicle Day 2025. I think the smart thing to do is consider what we're going to do for 2026. I'm really hoping to have something big. It is going to be the 20th anniversary. Finally, this toy has gotten old enough that I've seen young adults have children and say, these were my Bionicles I played with when I was about your age here. You can experience them. And I think that is really, really cool. I did get to meet at the San Diego Comic-Con this last year some really, really diehard Bionicle fans who have been interested in the history of this. They're really starting to realize which sets are really rare. Some people are really trying to put together the most complete sort of history of how this stuff was done. The questions that I always got asked from fans were always, smart and interesting questions, but they were always from 10 and 15-year-olds who are thinking of the moment. Well, now people are looking back and they're trying to sort of stitch the narrative and the history of Lego Bionicle. And with us coming up on 20 years, I think I'm going to go through and see what emails I've got, what other sketches I've got, what other little pieces that sort of fill in the narrative of how this book came to be. Somewhere I've got the answering machine message on tape where Jay Gardner called me and offered me the job. So that's pretty cool. I know that exists when I found out I was going to be drawing this. Let's see. Do you recall any specific reactions to your art being introduced into Bionicle? It was so different from earlier works. Yeah. I got hate mail from issue 1, the cover of issue 1 where Thok's spine is bent. I got hate mail from a 5-year-old who said I was drawing them wrong. I remember that. I also got lots of people who said this is totally different. It never occurred to me that these things could look this way. I did have one guy tell me, he was an adult, but he told me earlier this year that he had to take the poster down off his wall for the Bionicle Zero because it scared him too much. Now, he was about 5 or 6 at the time, but he just said it was just too intense. And I know it sounds kind of funny. I don't want to scare anybody with this stuff, but if I could have anybody react that much, I felt like I'm absolutely doing something right. My general rule of thumb when making art is basically this. You want a reaction. You want everybody to have a reaction to it. If you've done something interesting, done something dramatic, someone will love it or they'll hate it. What you don't want is something that's just kind of quiet and goes by everybody. It needs to have a punch. I always thought it was better if half the people loved it and half the people hate it than if everybody thought it was okay. To this day, I'll bet if you had a poll of asked who's your favorite Bionicle artist, it's probably me. If you also phrase it, who's your most hated Bionicle artist, it's probably me. My art style being that different created those kind of strong reactions. But believe me, I'm terribly okay with that. Let's see. Any other questions? I'm going to take one more. Steve or Liam, if you have anything out there, let's do that. But other than that, I'm going to say thanks for tuning in. Please follow me again on either Facebook or Instagram. Look me up on Stuart Sayger because I will have a really big Bionicle show here, live feed, very similar to this, with a lot of stuff that I'm going to pull out from the archives, and it can be more involved. I'll have more time than just this. So just follow me. And then get ready for 2026. And remember, if you do go to any of the other major comic book shows across the country, I'll bring Bionicle art with me. I know I'm doing the New York Comic-Con, Baltimore Comic-Con. There's the All Seas show, which is in Denver. Boy, I can't even remember all of them. Columbus, Ohio. If you go to my website, stuartsayger.com, there's a list of where I'll be. You just click on appearances and it'll tell you. You can bring your copies of Bionicle. I always love it when people bring me worn out childhood copies of Bionicle. I love seeing them. Let's see. Last comment here. I really love the Piraka and Piraka in your style. I would love seeing some characters such as DC's Metallo with the same style. It's funny. I never drew DC's Metallo, but I did a lot of work for DC, particularly Warner Brothers, in the style that I drew most of Bionicle with. So you can go online and find T-shirts of the Joker and Harley Quinn, specifically a Joker piece that's very similar to this. It's a Joker sublimated T-shirt. I'll see if I can find it and post it on my social media tomorrow, and you can see what shirts I did. But I did a Deadshot in this style. I did several for DC. Some got used, some didn't. I'm trying to remember. There was a Bane. There was a Black Manta. There was, I can't remember. There was a Talia, a Star Sapphire. I don't know. Again, water under the bridge, see if I can remember all of them. But this style was fun. It isn't for everybody, but the guys who liked it really liked it. And for those of you who have given me some nice compliments and brought me back for things like this, I'm really, really flattered. So, and believe me, I love drawing Brainiac. Steve, comment, I'm addressing Steve Wort's comment. Brainiac would also be interesting. I love Brainiac, and if I ever work on Legion of Superheroes, if I get to write it, the one character I need to have on my team is Brainiac 5. I think he is by far the most interesting character. They say he's living. I'm not convinced he is. I'm not convinced he's not. Exploring that would be really fun. So I think that's at the core, and I think that's a great last point, because to me, that's the wrestling match with drawing these characters. They are living, and yet they look so robotic. My challenge was to put as much life in these things as I can. And, I hope I did that. I hope you liked what I did. And write Lego. I hope I can do it again. How about that? So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I really had a blast. Will I be back next year? Am I invited for next year? I sure hope so. The only reason I wasn't on yesterday was I was still in Connecticut doing the comic book convention. So we made it happen today. Steve, thank you for your efforts. And also Liam, thank you so much for putting this together. I am always flattered when I get to see you guys at comic book conventions. I think it's really cool. I got to be a part of something that has meant so much to so many people and really means a lot to me. So come see me in person and we'll talk some more. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.